recording of our launch party. And yeah, we have a really great slate of readings today. So we're going to start with Linda, your piece, An Entirely Different Girl.
Thanks. It's great to be here and to celebrate with all of you. I've really enjoyed reading this issue, and I'm just very happy to be included in it. So I'm just going to read the first page of my story. How can you explain joy? The way it leaps without reason into the heart, bypassing the stricken mind. How it lays in the hand as your fingers curl around the new doll your mother had just sewn. The face pulled taut as bed sheets, the features painted bold and true, the appley cheeks and brown eyes, and the prairie fire color of Indian paintbrush blooming the lips. The expression caught between innocence and knowing. Not like the stiff, sad corncob dolls made by the other mothers in 1880, here on the pancake flat plains. An aunt from back east sent Matilda's mother material to make their own clothes and craft the dolls. Back east, where her mother was born and grew up, the plains that here surround their sod dwelling for miles and days and years were called fields, cut through with blue streams. Her mother drew Matilda pictures of Massachusetts. Across the fields, in the distance, mountains. She drew a circle at the bottom of one and said that's where Matilda's father grew up, in a mill town where waterfalls, powered the saws. In front of the mountains, she drew trees and wrote their names: oak, maple, birch, chestnut. On the plains, there were few trees. Her mother drew leaves of the different trees, and Matilda imagined their texture between her fingers, felt their slight scratch across her cheeks. Today, Matilda stood in the vast space of the prairie and wished her face was unroughened, her lips as bright as the new doll. 12 years old, and still she hugged it to her chest. She and her mother had wheeled a cart not far from their home to where buffalo ran, so her mother could collect their dung, the large chips used to fuel their cook stove. On the cart, the chips were piled higher than Matilda's head, the stack tilting dangerously. Her mother stood so close she could tip the stack over, and for a moment Matilda feared she would. She moved away from the cart, but her mother's attention was not on her daughter. Rather, it seemed to Matilda, it was on some faraway place. Massachusetts? A sharp gust swung her mother's dark dress about her like a vulture's wing. Buffalo chips fell from the cart. Startled, her mother gestured toward her. Go on, girl, pick them up. Matilda would not move, clutched the doll closer. Her mother's lips pressed together. The wind blew into the pitch of a whine, the same pitch as the words that came from Matilda. Won't, you ain't gonna make me, causing her mother to leap and slap Matilda, sending the doll to the ground. Matilda refused to follow, though the blow sent her reeling, as much from force as surprise. Her mother began to cry and reached for Matilda, but her daughter turned from her touch, strengthened by the sting of the wind against her reddened cheek. Legs now sturdy on the earth, she was proud she could stand up to her mother, to this place. Her mother sighed and began picking up the chips, an apology of sorts, and despite herself, Matilda relented. Together they gathered them all and piled them into the cart, and then began the slow roll home, wheels squeaking. The doll was left face down on the ground, shamed. Matilda, now, unable to want anything crafted by her mother, her own slap in her mother's face.
Linda, it's not often that we get historical pieces, but this one is so grounded in the sense of time and the sense of place. And yet these human emotions really shine through. Yes, so absolutely, like everybody should go and read the issue, read this piece. It's really great. And sorry, my cat is licking mouse. So, okay. All right, so next up we have got You Know the Kind of School. This is a great poem that did not begin as an Episterian, but here we go.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. It's great to meet you all. I also really love that the Chestnut reviews for stubborn artists, because I feel like I submitted a number of times. So I'm so glad to finally be in here. Yeah, and to get to meet all of you. So yeah, as Maria shared, this poem was not an Abecedarian, but here it is. You know the kind of school. Assigned in November, we were to become pilgrims on the classroom ship. So my mother crafted dress and collar for me to emulate honor and prudence. For January's lesson, we drew gentry or slave from a hat, and I wish I could say we threw Ticonderogas, jumped onto desks, but I knew too little then, only afraid of losing the few friends I had. March meant Ellis Island Day, when we needed to bring a dish from our heritage. Per my request, my parents braised eggs for hours. The spiced soy sauce quelled their fears I'd forget where I was from, really from. But my classmates showed up with spaghetti and shortbread, store-bought cake. It wasn't that the teacher opened the pan after dessert, or that my classmates uttered ew like a punchline. It wasn't my voyage home on the bus. It was the pan's weight in my mother's hand, with exactly the same contents as yesterday. 24 eggs instead of 0 inside. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Such a great reading. And yeah, as the Q people, we see people submitting over and over again. And yes, it does sometimes take a lot to kind of get your piece in. So I'm really glad that you did not give up and that we could publish this really, really amazing experience. Right. Next up is Jonah with Why Are You Still Here?
Thank you, and thank you for including me in this awesome group of writers. I really appreciate the opportunity. I feel like this story took a while to find the right home, and I think it finally did. So thank you. I learned the full story about what happened on my father's last day at work from Ryan Gibbs, who was in my father's history seminar on that last afternoon. Watch the door, Ryan said, ducking down behind the dumpsters to pick up small piles of the flattened cardboard boxes he was supposed to be throwing away. I kept my eyes on the bright yellow line of light coming from around the back door of the Best Buy stockroom, where he'd jammed half a concrete block to keep it open. I avoided eye contact as much as possible as he talked, embarrassed by the puckered spots around the neck of his Best Buy polo. There were wrinkled dimples around the necklines of all his shirts, where he obsessively dug in his fingers and wiped at the corners of his mouth. So they were sometimes wet with spit or dirty with whatever grime was on his face. It wasn't the spit or the dirt that bothered me. I didn't like thinking about the way his fingers moved without his awareness. Couldn't stand the thought of physical compulsions, like when someone pretended to be listening to you, but their eyes relaxed and focused on something, like they were looking through you. I didn't like thinking about the ways that we could disappear, but still be there. Class that day had started normally, according to Ryan. My father had been standing, moving back and forth in front of his whiteboards, engaging with students throughout the first 30 minutes of his Iron Age lecture, like his old self, except for a limp. At some point in the lecture, he'd gone quiet, stepped back and stared at the script he'd written across the whiteboards. Without a sound, he'd wandered out into the hallway. Students glanced at each other. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Just as Jerry began to get up from his seat to go and find my father, he re-entered, but without his pants and underwear. He walked in sock-footed, dangling beneath the wrinkled ends of his shirt tail. "My little eggs," he exclaimed, raising his arms before the packed auditorium, exposing himself even more. "My little eggs, all of you, by God, I'll sit on you one by one until you hatch." Someone made for the door, and then they all scattered, leaves in the wind, leaving my father sitting on the floor in front of his whiteboards. I asked if anyone stayed with my father. Ryan assured me that a small crowd waited in the hall, forming a semicircle around the pile of my father's clothes, waiting for Jerry to return with someone who knew what to do. Ryan booked it down a stairwell and escaped to his car, called it a day, a fact he was too stupid or immature to regret sharing with me. "Heavy shit, huh?" he said, wiping his mouth, but he said it in a way that could have been in reference to everything from my disappearing father to the pile of flattened refrigerator boxes. He didn't wait for a response, didn't see my shrug as he looked away to check the door. I walked home in the pink twilight, under a swirl of birds changing patterns over me, turning and dipping along the sound waves of some distant church bells calling out the hour. The watermelon gummy rings Ryan had given me, stored in the pocket of his cargo pants, were a mildewy green, and I let them go loose and slimy in my cheek, then set my jaw and clamped it hard on my tongue until they turned softly bitter and tangy like cut grass. I thought of my father's legs, how when you saw them in the summer, they seemed carved for a man of a different size, a man more delicate, paler in color. The smoothness of his calves had inspired his tormentors in school to call him bird legs. My mother sometimes did this too, and pinched at his thighs. He slapped her hands away, screeching like a barn owl. The light of the kitchen in those scenes seemed bright and effusive at the time, but leaked its brilliance somehow in my memory, because from then on, I would think of my father's legs as they had been on that last day, exposed under the bronze lights to the unforgiving eyes of his students.
Thank you so much for that reading. There's so many beautiful details in the story. Yeah, I mean, it's just everything is so keenly embodied and just cutting. Yes, so please, if you have time later, go back and finish reading the story. It's really exciting. All right, so we've got compulsory heterosexuality.
Thank you, Maria. I am so excited to go back and complete some of the things that I haven't finished reading yet now after hearing more of these snippets. So, all right, this is compulsory heterosexuality. The bartender with black curls, the blonde stalking across the road in a houndstooth coat, ponytail girl with the white teeth, the waitress with milkmaid braids across her perfect bare shoulders, the dykes making out at the karaoke bar, both of them. The girl behind the counter with upside-down lips, thighs like columns under the lathe, a waist like a neck, a girl with a chest so pale it looked like a mess of wires for a clever spy to snip and untangle, preferably with teeth, face inches from the explosion. A girl with red sashiko across both knees, a girl with horsey teeth and a news reporter's smile, the ceramics girl with ink smeared all over her arms, all fucking over. The library employee who smiled when I returned all my library books, the one who didn't, the bosomy one with life dedicated to Christ, the flat affect girl jittering in her daily puffer vest, whose mobility device whirred in late behind her every day, the girl who cried when she saw porn for the first time, the girl who would eat anything if she thought it would make me laugh, and the man in the end, because I saw a bit of each in all of him.
Such a great, so many small descriptions that just nail that person. Thank you so much for your reading. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go to Abhinav because I think that Abdul Jalal hasn't made it to Zoom. So, Abhinav, if you are ready, can you take it away with Clay?
Hey, I'm Abhinav, and really glad to be here and be a part of this issue. So here's my poem, Play. Uh, and so we made love, or maybe just talked about it, in the dim light of your bedroom, my kitchen, your face flickering like a static of light from a dream of ours. You were always up against it. The Wi-Fi, your flight schedule, my mother, the guilt of not being enough, time, a chip on our shoulder, the future hunching over itself like a man who outlived his time. I don't like remembering most of it. The specifics wear me out, and memories are carved in the blood, angles converging at the wrist, scratching and rehashing themselves like a novel going nowhere. But nowhere scares me, so I try to name things to contain them, map them out on the floor beneath my feet, smash the flank of light clean on the concrete. My therapist says none of what I tell her warrants a prescription unless I am lying, and I don't know how to translate the aftermath of want, which is still want. But a guy going nowhere wants it all at once. And I'm supposed to write it down, not the all but the specifics. Clutch the velocity of thought, seize the panic in a procedure of breath, block the escape route, yield nothing to the flattened light gleam in the back of my head. To the core of my skull and the eyeballs burning, skyline a gesture in the wake. and the cut of my heel, the smashed glass glittering. Gullet, a clog of mucus and language. Language loyal to itself, slithering in the nerve, inching for some debris or drain to scatter its scent across. So we did make love, because I know we talked about it. Your sun bleeding on the brackish water, my moon scattered on the reeds by my kitchen window. Across 3 time zones, you said you're kissing my forehead. And I said you're only doing it because you have. And you said hush, and crawl outside the mind and its mirror, and lick this breath of light with a naked lip, beyond word, beyond thought, a curve beyond intention. A sort of death and the time goes nil. My finger unknotting the tangle of your hair, our limbs tugged in each other like the comma of a lost language. I ask you, how long will it be like this? This litany of words in the wake of flesh, this gouging of oblivion, this gesturing at the throat of want and never quite breaking it open. Whatever you said next dissolved in the static. Then a curl of wind and your voice quivering. I'm coming, I'm coming, I'm coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was just an amazing reading. It's really an amazing poem. I will say that we've got some just awesome poetry in this issue, so please go check it out. So our chapbook author that we're going to be publishing is Abdul Jalal Musa Aliyu. We had the honor of publishing one of his poems in Chestnut Review, I believe in volume 3, which is Delineation of a Woman's Religion. No, what is he likes these long titles, so I think my brain is just really scattered. But anyway, he's an amazing poet. His chapbook is coming soon, TM. So I am going to read his poem in honor of him here today, and then we will proceed. Okay. So this desire to flee from people I cherish to a strange world is a form of brain disease I'd be lying to say I comprehend. A battle is going on between my iman and the voices in my head. I tried to make sense of it, but my therapist told me not everything has to make sense to make sense. I locked myself in the room because this horniness is threatening to throw my soul in the fire of Jahannam. I asked my friend what being bipolar feels like, and he told me it renders him numb like a cadaver. An acquaintance informed me she self-harms to feel alive because when the demons sneak in, her body feels lifeless. She craves for a proof that she too, like other humans, has blood streaming in her veins. Tell me, will I swim in the waters of hellfire if this insanity has a hand in me putting a full stop to my life? My mualim said the ink is lifted off a man living on the mat of madness. There is a body in my body telling me suicide is selfish. Had our lives belonged to us alone, Allah wouldn't intertwine our hearts with others. I'd be lying to say I comprehend my desire to flee the people I love and enter a strange world. There is a hole in my brain that devours every single atom of happiness that falls on my body. But anguish, loss, trauma, torment, and everything devoid of joy feast between my breasts. A critic asked why every poem I craft walks through the gates of grief, and I said, because my poems are a haven where men like me, whose headspace are never free of noise, come to enjoy the therapy in knowing they aren't alone.
Really wonderful.
All right. So I just want to say thank you and also to do some shout outs. So James, our EIC, is here today. Brooke, our prose editor, now flying solo, but maybe some of you worked with Nadia, who is departing and we shall miss her dearly. Praise, who is our assistant prose editor. We've got Seema, Shadrach, and Keely and Charlotte, who are all readers for us. And Shadrach is also a former contributor to the magazine with Factor X, which is that volume 4 or volume 3? I can never, I don't know, it happened. Yes, and Shadrach just recently got into Brown University on a full scholarship. So we're raising some money to help send him there. So we have a campaign going on GoFundMe. It's on our social media. So if you could share around, we're trying to support him because he's super talented. And yeah, oh, and my assistant managing editor, Luke, is here too. So we have an amazing staff. There are many, many, many people that are not here who work really hard on these things behind the scenes so that we can have the sorts of issues that we have. So I'd like to thank everybody and also all of you for being amazing contributors. And also because now there's a cat sighting. That's not my cat, but it's a cute cat. Yeah. So we're gonna open up to part two. Again, this is like completely just super low stakes. It's really chill. We just kind of ask each other questions and we respond. And then if you feel like jumping in, if there's something you want to add, please feel free. So I am going to start us off because things. And I just want to ask you, Jonah, like your piece is so well embodied. I read it when I was putting the issue together because that's part of my job. And I was just so struck by the really sharply depicted, cutting sort of this happened sort of moments and images. And I'm kind of wondering where those came from in terms of your inspiration and how you kind of cobbled that together into this story that has so many different like foci while sort of having this strong through line that just makes it like fantastic.
Thank you for your comment. And I think that's a great question. I think probably it comes, excuse me, most from a sense of place, kind of how things unfold or how things can happen in the type of place that the narrator is in. It's a small town. She's 15. She can't drive. These things happen as you're taken from place to place. These are conversations that take place in cars, at the grocery store with your parents after school, in doctor's offices, the places you're taken or the places you can walk. So the story kind of moves, I think, in the way that a 15-year-old moves and the way that a girl sort of traverses where she is, and it's just kind of told in a line in that way. Yeah.
Can anyone ask a question?
Yes, of course, please.
I was curious for Abhinav and Hazel, like both of you had like kind of a hybrid form, right? Like a prose poem, and I was curious how you arrived at that shape, especially because you both have such strong images, and I was curious if the poem always started out that way or if you had a different form before you arrived at the one that was published.
Yeah, I can speak to my poem. A lot of the writing that I do starts out by hand in a notebook, and I pretty much always write it just as like straight block, like, like it's prose. And I sometimes it just stays that way when I type it in and do the transcribing, and sometimes I end up not putting line breaks in it. And it's very funny. I brought a poem that was also in the like block format to my poetry critique group earlier this week. And I asked them, like, is this just lazy or does it work? And they were like, no, for this one, it really works. Like, and so it's just, I think that's my first step. And then I look at it, I'm like, okay, do I need to like slice it up into anything else? And then go from there. And so I guess it's maybe just quite simply, they all begin that way, and then line breaks get added later in my usual process.
For me, actually, like I wrote it in a different format. There were like lines and everything, but it wasn't working for me at the time because I realized it had like the way it moved from one image or one thing to one idea to another. It's like it's very reckless and sort of confusing kind of, because it's dealing with memory and confusion, that kind of thing. And I realized eventually that I like the blog format honestly, and I realized that there's a recklessness in the speaker that can only sort of accommodate a prose kind of web. Otherwise, I feel like whenever there are like line breaks, there has to be like space and breath, a sort of pause between things of stillness. which isn't in this poem. That's why I felt like, that recklessness would be sort of accommodated in a prose format only.
I have a question for Linda. I edited your piece, so I'm very familiar with it. But one of the reasons it stood out to us when we first read it in the queue is that it is historical fiction, and it's like incredible historical fiction. We just get so little of it. And I think what's hard about historical fiction is it still needs everything else a contemporary story needs. The characters need to work, attention to language, that urgency, but it also requires like a certain immersion in another time period. Um, that might not be like innate knowledge that any one person has. It has to really transport the reader. So I'm curious for you how maybe like research fits into your work, and also if you like focus largely on historical fiction or you move between times in all of the writing you do.
I think I have been writing more historical short stories. And I think part of the reason is because getting older, I understand history in a way that I never did when I was younger, and realize that I am a part of history. So, and the other thing that's happened, I've gotten really interested in artists, and I've written a number of stories about artists, and some of them are based on real characters, such as I wrote a short story kind of based on Joseph Cornell. So I've been kind of, that sort of started me dipping back into the past. And I just find it really interesting. And but one of the things that often happens to me when I'm writing historical short story or trying to, is that I get really stuck because I don't quite know how to begin it. And that happened with this story also, which, I started writing because I got really fascinated by a photograph of a mother and daughter in the plains. And there was just this image of, the mother's dress being like a vulture's wing. And that kind of finally started me being able to actually write the story. So I guess it really, each story that I write that takes place in a different era, sometimes I get caught in the research, and it does take me a long time to actually, simmer all this stuff in my brain before I can really feel like I understand who the characters are. And other times it's easier. So I guess, it's kind of all over the map for me. But I really like going into the past. And I mean, obviously I'm not a historian. I was a terrible history student, terrible. But the idea of fiction and the imagination sparked by something in the past is where it kind of starts to move for me. So thank you for the question.
Hi. So I have made a slight mistake. Um, so thank you so much for that answer, Linda. It was really, yeah, I think it's really tough to write really well embodied historical fiction. And definitely the photograph thing, that makes so much sense, but it's really hard to pull a whole story out of the photo. So
Well, it was a very compelling photograph, and I framed it, and I actually stared at it for a couple of years before I was able to really start the story. So yeah, obsessions, right?
that's totally fair. I've been doing research by watching a documentary about the March to the Sea. So I understand.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay, so we have a new reader named Keely. And apparently we also have an artist in this issue named Keely. So Keely, I really don't want to put you on the spot, but if you would like me to sort of screen share your artwork so that we can all appreciate it, it is gorgeous. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. I've been, and I'm sorry I'm outside. I felt like the perfect place to hear everyone's beautiful work was just outside. So I hope you don't mind. I took you all out on this beautiful day. But yeah, I just am incredibly honored to have my artwork presented in a lit mag. I just think it's so wonderful to have it with all of your literary pieces. Like just hearing you all go through them and paint with your imagery, and then also, you know, from my perspective, I'm an artist, right? I'm a working graphic designer. I do this stuff constantly, right? Whenever I'm painting, I literally sit there for hours and I work through all of these different images and feelings and thoughts that all of you have put to the page really beautifully. So it's just really nice to kind of hear all of you as artists kind of speak and paint in this really interesting way through your words. And then from my perspective, having this wonderful opportunity to just share my work. And then just a little bit about the piece. So Quiet Spring was done in acrylics. I don't traditionally paint the way a lot of normal acrylic painters do, just because oftentimes the paint dries so quickly that it's really hard to add details. So I kind of lean into that when I'm painting, and I add a lot of texture. So actually, if you were to see this piece in person, it stands out from the page because some of this ink is like half an inch thick, right? So it's really, really interesting to paint in this way, and it's just very uncommon. So anyway, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to have my art in here. You have no idea how excited I am. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. Also, thank you for taking us outside. That sounds perfect to me. Yeah, I love this art. I also I gravitate towards oil because acrylic dries so fast and then I can't change my mind. So I was really struck by the textures here because it almost looks like you know, an oil painting sort of texturally. You kind of see that, but we're always on the lookout for amazing artists, and we're so glad to have you in the issue. You know, so thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, you want to say
thank
something,
you so
Linda?
much.
Yeah, please
Yeah,
just jump in. Yeah.
I really love this painting. One of the things I really enjoy about it is the tension between the deep perspective, the deep view that we get across the pond and into the trees, and then the right on the surface of the flowers in the
Yes.
beginning. I mean, you can, even though we can't see the actual painting, it comes across really well as an illustration, which is kind of interesting. You really get that texture of the impasto of the flowers and the drawing us back to the fact that this is a flat surface, a canvas, and then suddenly again we're way projected into space, into those trees in the distance. So I really enjoyed that tension.
Yeah. And thank you so much. I always struggle with how to create depth in my pieces, but while also not, because like realistic art is beautiful. We have so many impressionists, right? Like you look at Monet, you look at, you know, other impressionist artists of the time, and I'm like, how can you kind of marry these two parts while also having a little bit of that tension and that darkness, right? So I don't want to be an abstract expressionist, right, with my work. I don't want to be an impressionist, but I always want to try to challenge what I can do with paint and texture. So thank you so much for your comments. Seriously, it means the world.
Yeah, it just calls attention to the process in a way that I think is really interesting, you know. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Yeah, do other people have questions for each other or for our staff?
I wanted to ask Vincent how she sort of maneuvered her line break, because her lines are like very different lengths. They are very, you know. So I just wanted to ask you, like, how does she sort of operate?
Thanks, Abhinav. Yeah, it is only because the form requires the first letter of each line to be in the alphabet. And so previously the poem was not like this. It was like, I think it was maybe couplets and quatrains alternating, so that it was focused on the N word. But because the setting is at school, I thought the alphabet would lend itself well, and just fitting with that form without it being too awkward to read kind of necessitated some line variants. So I hope that the first word ends up, carrying the sharpness. And it's not so jarring having different line lengths, but that's kind of what guided it. It's like the poem did not start this way, and then slowly it was like, okay, how do I say what I wanted to say, but like with this particular structure?
Even the
Oh,
version that we
hey.
got first, yeah. I don't want to share the top because it's got your contact details, but like, yeah, it's completely different. And then when we accepted it, she actually said, hey, I've been working on this and I have an ABCDarian version. Is that weird? I was like, no, please, like this, so it's got the same vibe, but like there's definitely a lot of details that like didn't make it. And, there was a lot of shaping and sort of intentionality that came out in the ABCDarian. So I love this version of it too, but the ABCDarian.
I was gonna say the first time that I read it, I didn't even notice it was an Abacern, and which I think maybe is a strength that it was like good enough even without that form. But to go back and see that now, it just like adds to it. So it's really awesome poem.
Thanks. I mean, I'm curious for the editors, like how often do pieces change so much, from when you accept to when you're working with the writer and getting it published? Is it the vast majority stay pretty similar and it's like little copy edits here and there? Or is it like actually the way your process works, there ends up being a lot more collaboration throughout that changes the work much more?
think
Yeah, go ahead,
Maria
Brooke.
okay, Maria can
Yeah.
speak to poetry. I only edit the prose, but we like do a thorough round of editing on every single piece. So it tends to be a little bit more than copy editing. We're definitely looking for pieces that are, sure of themselves and like solid as they are, but we tend to see like opportunities to tighten them in some way. So I would say every piece has some amount of shaping. I've never edited with the alphabet in mind per se, so like that level maybe not on the prose side, but there's often like sections that get cut or rearranged or some lines that get sharpened throughout. Like I'd say we typically do like 3 to 4 passes back and forth with the author on prose.
Yeah, it's similar over here. I mean, it really depends. Like, I think a lot of the poems, like, I tend to do sort of top heavy edits. So, like, the first draft that I get back to the poet will have like a lot of suggestions. And then maybe some things will come up as that gets narrowed. But then, usually it sort of descends more into like, oh, this is a little weird. Or then, okay, we got to proofread this part. But yeah, I would say that I like the idea of transformation. So I am looking at it, and just like Brooke, I'm looking for that potential, the things that maybe are not quite, working yet. And that does mean that sometimes there are some poems that they don't need that much. And there are other poems that like need a little bit more, but we still want it to be recognizable as like the same essence. We don't want it to be like, okay, this is completely changed. Now, of course, if the poet had an intention, and maybe the intention didn't come that strongly in the first draft, it might seem like, oh, okay, like this is now focused on something different. I think like with the kind of school, there were a lot of there was like a nebula of imagery that then didn't make it into the Abecedarian form because it's more focused on the central image of the eggs and like the Ellis Island sort of anecdote that's threaded through the second half of the poem. But I think that actually sort of really fits because the honor prudence classroom ship, like we're starting in the fall, we're starting the poem, and then we sort of sail into this connected Ellis Island image, like, building America, immigration, colonization, and then, this sort of othering that takes place through the teaching of American history to people of different identities. And I think that is a really strong through line. So some of the other things, maybe they can be repurposed or be used for other poems, but certainly like, yeah, it's really, so thank you for the question. It was really fun to engage with. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but would one of our readers like to speak about the reading process?
I could just say this was lovely. It was nice to be able to hear everyone like perform their poems and pieces and everything. I really value that.
Well, thank you all so much. I think we're gonna, I think we're gonna pause it here. It was great to see everybody. It was so amazing to hear your words. It always means a lot to me. Even if you recorded the piece for our SoundCloud, which I also appreciate, like it's just amazing when we're, getting to engage in person like this. So this is not the end. Please keep in touch. Yeah, Linda, do you have?
I really appreciate, even though I couldn't figure out the program, so I couldn't read I read it, but I couldn't send it to you all, and some wonderful reader on your staff read it. But I've had a lot of people comment who read the story and also listened to it, and what a great idea it is. And I think that it is a wonderful idea to have that option to hear the story read as well. So I think that's really great of y'all.
Thank you so much. So we do workshops. We sometimes have opportunities for our contributors. We do retreats. And of course, you may have gotten a message about the 5th anniversary volume that we're putting together. So you are all eligible as artists in 5-4 to have your work included in that. It's going to be voted on by readers. So we may be in touch about that sometime this year. So I hope that our paths cross in the future. Thank you so much for all you do. Please keep writing and making art. And yes, I hope you have a lovely weekend. Okay.
Thank you.